Welcome, welcome, welcome to this October month's Wisdom Talk. It is the 4th of October and it's 1 o'clock here on the Pacific Coast and some other time, and perhaps some other day, wherever you are tuning in and when you are tuning in to this recording. So, welcome. Today I am with Robin Soul Lieberman, and I am just honored to be here with her today. And for those of you who are watching this who have not been here before, I was inspired to do this Wisdom Talks to gain perspective and get more understanding about what wisdom and truth is. And I figured the best way to do that was to hear from those who I respect deeply and who I know carry a piece of wisdom and a piece of truth in their work in the world. So, before we really begin today and diving into this conversation, let's just take a moment and to stop and to take a breath and just honor that breath that we have every moment of every day. I often say that usually our breath is breathing us, but when we stop and give attention to it, we get to breathe our breath. It has a different relation when we become aware. When we become aware of our breath entering in and going out again. And each time we breathe in, we connect with our heart, right? Because just on a physiological level, the air comes in, the oxygen and all that gas that is all around us all the time, it comes in and it exchanges through that membrane that's in our lungs into our blood, and our heart then pumps that blood through our body. And so we bring the world into us through our breath. And our heart being this place of love. Each time we breathe, and our heart, this place of love, pumps that blood through our body, it's pumping that blood, that love through our body. So each breath is a breath of love. And as we breathe in this way, we take a moment to just really honor and recognize the earth, this beautiful planet, this biosphere that is our home. And not only our home, but it's the home of all the rooted ones and the four-legged ones, the flying ones, the slithering ones, the swimming ones, the elemental ones. So when we connect with the earth, we connect with all of that life, not just the human kind, but the animal kind and the plant kind. And as we breathe this breath, not only do we connect with our earth, but we connect with the cosmos as well, this beautiful universe that our planet is held within, like an embrace. And so in this breath and this way of breathing with earth and sky, we arrive into this present tense moment, right? This present tense moment when it is where we live. It is where we breathe. It is where we feel the range of emotions. The present tense is the only place we can be. Before and what's to come, that's all constructs. But right here and right now is where we arrive, this perpetual moment of life. And in this particular moment of life, we are here with Robin. And me, I'm Zara Indigo. Hi, folks. And normally we are zooming in to Facebook as well, but Mercury retrograde, or the forces that be, has Facebook down at the moment. And so we are recording this and it will get posted up there in our future time. But for now, I want to introduce Robin. Robin is a UCLA trained mindfulness facilitator, a cultural anthropologist, and an author. She has a keen interest in world wisdom, which is perfect for wisdom talks. And she also is very interested in philosophy and ceremony. She's dedicated to the emerging culture of the global citizen. Robin has spoken at the United Nations headquarters, worked with global leaders through events organized by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with new arrival immigrants and refugees specifically, and also with marketing teams of international companies. She sits on the board of the Freebird Foundation and is a nationally recognized commentator on a number of platforms. Robin is the author of The Charisma Code, and she lives in the greater Los Angeles area with her partner, her kitties, and their garden of honeybees. Yay, and I saw a kitty walk behind you just a moment ago, and we may be interrupted by a cat or a dog here on my end. So welcome, Robin. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today and your community. I really value fewer things in life than the discourse of wisdom and really getting to exchange how my little worldview and my experiences has brought wisdom to me and how yours has brought wisdom to you and your community. And I hope we have some time at the end to converse with some of those folks as well.
Yay. So, as I shared with you, Robin, and as I've shared in the announcement of this, the three questions that we really dive off from in this conversation is, what is wisdom? What is wisdom? What is truth? Right? What is truth? And how do we access wisdom and truth in these very complicated times? How do we touch base with it? How do we bring it into our world? How do we walk with wisdom and truth? So I would love just to begin from hearing from you, Robin, about what these questions invoke inside of you.
Yeah. So the first one, are you familiar with the old Socratic method? Socrates would sit around and with his people, and they would just usually they'd have like conversation partners, and it was a spiritual practice. And they would literally just one person would ask the question, and then another person would either answer or ask another question, and they would just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was like this dance. And I've always found that I respond really well to that. Will you ask me, in the spirit of Socrates and the Socratic method, would you ask me the first question? And I just want to sort of answer from that open space of presence.
Robin, what is wisdom?
To me, wisdom is what is discovered when we show up paying attention to reality. When we show up and pay attention to the reality that's happening and unfolding, like right now, the clearer and cleaner that I can be with not letting my past or distractions or even allowing my awareness or consciousness to merge with any kind of emotionality. I'm aware of it, but instead I'm letting it be a fuller picture. I'm not contracting into my little small personal world, and instead I'm expanding to really show up and receive the wisdom of the moment, what can be born, what I don't know, even being aware and open to discovery. And I think that we create wisdom, any of us, it has the capacity to hold and carry great wisdom simply by showing up and paying attention. And you know, I was part of, I think, why my answer came that way just now too, is I was watching, Indigo, your interview with Bruce Lipton with these wisdom talks from 2 months ago, and you were sharing that Nikki Scully, who's a teacher of ours, a shared teacher where we met through alchemical healing, and another woman, Jyoti, I think you said, that they both brought to you that wisdom that and correct me if I'm wrong, but that Nikki Scully had told you that there's the coin of the realms, and that in order to travel in the realms, you needed a currency or a coin. And that coin was paying attention. Is that correct?
Stay
Yeah, literally paying attention. Yeah, and then Joe T said, and there's a key to the realms. Like, all right, well, in order to pay the coin, you need to show up. So I think that if we were to address that to what I was just discussing or exploring with wisdom, that we have this reality in front of us. And if first I need to show up to, I need to show up to you, I need to show up to this community, I need to show up to whatever wants to move through me, the vessel of my little Robin life. And and then pay attention is, I think, the same thing as presence, as far as I can tell. In your introduction, you mentioned that I work in the arena of mindfulness, and in mindfulness, what is it but being mindful of the moment, showing up and paying attention. And I think Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets, a poet who writes about the natural world. And I feel that in her poetry, and any good poet's poetry, there is this, they pay attention to life in such a way that they can then articulate something that sort of moves us into a new way of seeing the world, into paying attention ourselves. And then we can be actually, I spoke of myself as a little Robin. When I'm really paying attention, I am now a resource to receive the intelligence of the 10,000 infinite things of creation. If I'm really there and I'm really receiving what the there is and open to it, right? Receiving is partly just, I'm curious. It's that curious attentiveness. And that itself is what I think creates a woman or a man of wisdom.
Mm, yes. Presence.
Presence, receptivity, is that what you were just saying?
Receiving, receptivity, right? We are these antennas, right? We bring in information from our inner world as well as all around us. And how do we take that information in and have it be the key that unlocks whatever it is that the moment is teaching us, right?
Yes, Ashe.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and thank you for pointing to this showing up and paying attention. My students out there know that this is a mantra of mine. Show up, pay attention, and everything you need is right here, right? Everything at any moment. Even if it's a really difficult moment, if it's the worst moment of your life, it's horrible, something really bad's happened. Facebook is down. Oh my God, I can't. No, that's not that horrible. I'm kidding. But how do we show up into the moment and know that everything we need is here, the most joyous moment of our life? How do we show up fully to that moment?
Yes, yes. I get a little chills just listening to you. I mean, to really bring it down to earth, even today, as some of you may have heard on the news, there was a horrific oil spill. I'm in Orange County right now, so it was in Huntington Beach. It's just a few miles away from me. And it poured well over 100,000 gallons of oil into the ocean, and they are already seeing, sea life being washed up onto the shore, and they're worried about, everything, as you can imagine. And so, hearing that news this morning, it was, I can think a few things that feel more locally horrific than that at the moment. And how do, and the question I asked myself, in that moment, and it's so perfect knowing that I get to have this beautiful discourse with you today, is that, like, how do I show up in wisdom for this? Because this is a moment that's asking for my attention. This is a moment that is demanding our attention, even, one might say. And for those of us who care, like today, it was funny, before I heard the news, I already decided that my octopus was going to be part of my attire for our gathering. And in retrospect, it's like, okay, this octopus, they're calling out. Even, even, oh, would you have an octopus too? Oh, yeah, little sweet octopus. Yeah. Yeah, just showing up and paying attention to, I think that for me, that's both the seen and the unseen. And that some part of me was, I believe, connected to it at some level, that felt like this octopus wanted to come forward, and then, but it also means, I think the power of that is not just like, oh yay, I knew what was going on, I was showing up and paying attention. I think the power of that is actually how much in the unseen can we also bring care and help and healing and light and goodness and wellness. Yeah. Yeah.
Light and goodness and wellness.
Yeah.
Yeah. This piece about there's a humility I'm hearing, right? It's like not so much this like, oh yeah, I felt it happening before it happened, but like, oh wow, how poignant, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word here that's jiggling me, but when we show up and pay attention in this way and we begin to receive these messages that then align, that seem synchronistic or coincidental, or like, how did I know that was going to happen? There's a humility, right? This walking with humility and bowing to that really deeply.
Yes. Very, very deeply. And that humility is born from our interconnectivity, is it not? The fact that, like, I and we know that that what happens out there is happening in here. And I think that the wisdom reveals this to us, wisdom of showing up and paying attention and seeing the synchronicities and seeing COVID, another practical example of we're all interconnected. I mean, it's a very physical, tangible example of well, it's actually not, it's quite invisible as well. It's a virus, and we could use microscopes, we have technology to do that, but I mean, like, how quickly did that spread around the globe? How quickly? We are, if anything, this reclusiveness, this shielding ourselves from maybe some of the more outward travel or gatherings has shown us is, it's like, okay, what happens when I draw in and my home is now my world, but yet at the same time I know that my home is not, but that world does not end at my walls, at my home's walls, because I'm now watching a virus that is affecting an entire planet. Yeah.
Touching everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know how appropriate this is in the time of COVID, but I've always felt like, and I don't know if this is truth or not truth, right? And this question of what is truth, I don't know. But I've always felt like viruses are information, right?
Mm.
They're information, and they're information in a way where they travel through and they touch us all, right? Whether it's the COVID virus or the common cold virus or the flu virus, these viruses come out and they touch us and we change because of them. They bring information, and how we receive, how we show up and pay attention to that information is key, right? We can go into withdrawal, we can go into anger, we can go into any number of emotions, but we can also go into curiosity and go into inquiry and go into wonderment of what is the message here. How do we receive this message, this information, and help it change us?
Mm.
There's bad that happens, and then how do we also invoke the good?
Mm.
And
Mm.
I don't know if that's truth or not truth, right or wrong, but there's something about that as I've been watching COVID move, and as I've been watching how different people respond to it in different ways, right? Some people disregarding it, some people conspiracy theorizing it, some people meeting it in a way where there's fear, some people meeting it in a way where there's nonchalantness, right? There's so many different ways that this information affects us.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
a study, really, a study in myself and I think in humankind all the way around.
Agreed.
And that doesn't make the tragedy of it any less, right? And the loss that comes from it any less. In fact, it makes that even more poignant in a way.
I
So,
agree. I
yeah,
agree. Yeah. And it speaks again to our humility and our interconnection. Yeah.
absolutely. We're porous.
Yeah.
The world doesn't end with my body or my walls.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so true. This atmosphere moves around all of us. The breath I breathe is the breath you breathe, is the breath that octopus breathes, right?
Exactly. Yes. And that oil, just because it is spilled in one ocean, doesn't mean that terrestrial beings are not affected by it immensely, our seafood, etc. So yeah, that is maybe one of the easier ways that we could see wisdom in action in the world. Actually, I mean, we can see, I'm sorry, interconnectivity in action in the world. Maybe one of the cleanest or most simplest ways of seeing it, the fact that what I eat, yada yada yada, terrestrial, water, etc. But then the question is like, how do we tend to it? And I think where we were growing at the very beginning of our conversation is like, um, you know, if I feel a kind of if I pay attention, a kind attention to what is happening, a reality to it, that I will grow wisdom. And that your response was so beautiful, Indigo. You said, um, the pain that it could be a horrific, challenging thing that we pay attention to, or a very joyful one. But when we show up and pay attention, we're actually growing in our, well, I like to say we're growing in our soul force. You spoke about my book, The Charisma Code, at the introduction, and I talk about charisma as soul force, that it's this gift of grace that we can then create political action in the world, revolutions, if you will, or influence with each other, our family, our company, our world, our politics. But that soul force, and then this is maybe, you know, what I mean, the answer of like, what's truth? What is truth? It seems to me that truth is just the byproduct of showing up. So we get little wisdoms, we get truths, And one of the big truths that seems to be real for me is that when I'm able to leave my personal again, leave the over fixation on the mental or the emotional, the thoughts and the emotionality, and I can actually show up for a larger world, for a larger moment. There seems to be kind of this unveiling or this revealing of truth that is so much more juicy to me and exciting and full and vital and full of discovery and wonder, and it includes a kind of interconnectivity. And I think about how, paying attention, when I talk about like the wisdom is paying attention to what's happening. Also, the thing that's been most interesting to me, Indigo, these days is paying attention to the one that's paying attention.
Yeah.
Turn in that focus and be like, what is that thing that's paying attention to this? Because when I pay attention, like this world is changing all around in numerous different ways. And and there's some part of me though that is not changing. And what is that part of me that, when I was 7 years old and when I'm in my current age, what part is the same? What part is just watching? What part brings awareness? What part brings the illumination or the light of awareness to all of this? I believe it's that resilient part, that steadfast stillness that's able to meet something like an atrocity of the oil spill in Orange County, California right now, with a kind of presence that's not reactive, but rather it includes all the emotionality and the horror and the terror of it, and the pain of it, the heartbreak of it, and allows that to be there, but is also like big enough to actually handle it. Because if we really, really, really paid attention to what just happened and what it is affecting right now and the life forms that it's affecting and how long this is going, we're going to have to deal with cleaning it up, that might be a little too much to handle, actually. That might actually be a little bit much to handle. And I think that the one part of us that can handle anything, the high joys and the low lows, is that watcher. And I also believe that that watcher is the one that when we show up as it, as that awareness in the world, and we allow the world in, right, that open and receptivity that you were talking about, we allow the world in, that's when our soul force grows. Right there, like it's there. I don't think we have much of a soul force when we're stuck in the personal. And I mean, you know, as a human, I go in and out all the time. I can feel the difference. You can feel the difference. We know the difference when we are like in it. You know, for me, dance is one of my portals. And I think that there are, you know, there's portals, everybody. What's one of your portals where you feel most vital and alive and full of soul force?
Me, so I think two things come to mind immediately. One is art, when I'm
Yes.
creating something and time and space become non-existent, and something arises through that soul force that wasn't there before. And the other time that that happens for me is when I'm teaching and I see that aha, when I see another person opening or blooming, right? Like the lotus, they've been in that seed and suddenly they see something as more and they reach towards that light and then there it is. So
Beautiful. So, like being receptive to seeing the growth in others is something that brings you fully present, and you kind of rise to the occasion with them. Yeah.
exactly. Then it isn't personal. I'm there. I'm not separate from that moment in the teaching, right? I'm sitting in a teacher role and there's a student role, but I'm also sitting as a student learning from the student who is the teacher, right? There's this beautiful lemniscape of the two coming together, and in that nexus point, something new emerges.
Yeah.
It's really, really beautiful.
That is so lovely. So lovely. Yeah. Yeah. So showing up with soul force, I think, is definitely one of another access points to, right? It's positive reinforcement for us to keep using the discipline. I would almost say like a yogi's discipline to come back again and again and again to this, to the watcher, to the witness, to the deeper force. It's like it's oceanic, it feels like, in comparison to when I'm lost in the challenge of my personal self.
So the soul force, you said oceanic, and that made me feel like, is the soul force something that's individual, or is it tapping into a more of a collective experience? Do you know? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think it's definitely collective. Yeah, I think it's definitely collective.
And then a question that comes on top of that is, out of that collective soul, um, is the soul force, especially what you're speaking of, like in your book, is it all the same? Like my soul force and your soul force is all the same kind of soul force, or is there different expressions of that?
Yeah, so my experience is there's different expressions of it. So when we connect to the part of us that is the experiencing the experiencer of the experience. So the experiencer right now, there's an right, you can feel that, just the difference. Like there's the experience happening of this conversation, and then there's the part of us that is the experiencer of the experience. Right. So that experiencer feels to me like the embodiment of soul force, of a kind of that's where that soul force lives. And yet, each of us is like a different temple. We're a different conduit. We have a different personality of which the soul force can ride through. And the clearer and cleaner that personality is, meaning the less it is carrying the baggage of our past and the trauma, we might say, that's a really hip word right now, and people actually know what it means, like stored crap in our bodies from emotional content that we were unable to just let go and release at a certain point, right? And so there's this, the clearer and cleaner we are, the more we have practiced letting go and said yes to the atrocities and the glories of this human incarnation, let go of needing to control it to match our preferences, the more that our soul force is bright, but yet it is still moving through. I mean, that's one of the great gifts, I think, of being on planet Earth too, right? Is that there's manifestations, there's colors here, there's different flavors, there's different species, there are different foods and buffets, and the whole, like, the white light, let's call that spirit, goes through a prism. That's how I've always seen it anyway. It goes through a prism and then it releases all those colors, like on that album of Pink Floyd. But you've got that white light going through the prism. You've got all the colors. So each of those colors I see of as a different soul force. So nobody, in my experience, has the same charisma or the same soul force. It has a definite expression, but it is that the more we've done our work of releasing and letting go and cleaning out the temple, the prism. I would think of my body in this instance, in this conversation, as the prism. The more that spirit, that soul, is able to express itself most purely through what I am.
I love that image. So now I'm seeing all of us humans as these clear prisms, right? And oh, but it's a little cloudy over here. Got to work on that. Oh, there's a little obscurity in this part of the prism. The more we clear that out and make it crystalline and pure, the more that color can shine through. That's a
Love
beautiful.
that. I love what you said, Indigo. I love that. I love thinking of that. And and so then the question that, as I dance around with wisdom and truth, the question of like, how do you clean up those little smudges on the prism, right? That's a great question. I really do feel that in this century that there is I think that we're at large asking that question. I think we're asking it in many different ways, and there's many different languages and vernaculars that are used to ask that question. But I do think that we're all asking, how do we clean our prisms? And the reason why I think this has become so clear, and COVID maybe has helped push this conversation to the forefront of the news cycle, is purely from the basis of mental health issues and trying to figure out how do we show up here in a way that feels good. Like, hey, I want to be happy. How about you? Right? Like, raise your hand if you want to be happy, yo. Like, we all want that, right? I think that's what the Dalai Lama said. One of his, like, compassion is his religion, but basically he says all humans want the same thing, which is happiness. I couldn't agree more with the Dalai Lama in that instance. And one of the things that I think we're seeing is that those smudges on the prism are make for very unhappy human. Make for just not a very happy human. And because we're not getting to experience what it's like to have life force, chi, shakti, mana, energy, call it what you will, life force just moving through us. And so it feels like blockages and closes. And so I do think that we are asking that question. And for the sake of this discourse, Are there any ways that come to mind for you, Indigo, with how you clear some of the smudgies, some of the trauma, some of the past? What are your magic tools?
There are a couple of things that come to mind, and I'm just noticing I've been watching you the whole time. And right when we started talking about prisms, I glanced over at my little square here, and there's this light on my face. So I'm like, how funny that it comes in right now when we're talking about that.
Beautiful.
So, breath. Right? When we started today, I was talking about how so often the breath is breathing us, meaning we're not paying attention to it because it just does its thing. It's supposed to. Our bodies have an automatic breathing mechanism, so we don't have to think about it. But as soon as we begin to bring our awareness to our breath and we breathe our breath, that's one of the ways that we clear out some of the obscurities. Couple other ways that come to mind is allies, whether it's a therapist, whether it's an animal, whether in spirit or a fuzzy friend around us, right? Or a friend that we can reach out to, or whatever that ally is, an ancestor that speaks through us to give us wisdom. Having allies is a huge way to work with those obscurities. This morning I was sitting and having breakfast with a mutual friend of ours, and just to sit with a friend in this time when I'm so often interfacing through these little squares of Zoom was deeply healing, right? There's this healing that happens, and sharing, right? The ability to share. Not so much about, oh, this happened, not that talk therapy going into the story kind of thing, but more going under it, looking at the patterns, right? And when I look at the patterns and I breathe into that by being present, showing up and paying attention, then some of that cloudiness dissipates, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But
Yeah,
so many ways. What about you, Robin? How do you clear that out?
thank you. Yeah, I agree. One of the big ones, teachers for me, has been breath as well, and different breath work practices. It's just such a, I mean, obviously we're not the only ones that have been playing with breath to center and find our, to clean our vessels. For thousands of years, the sacredness of the breath through cultures around the world. This has been so amazing. And I loved the grounding meditation you brought us in through our breath at the beginning of today's session. That was really beautiful, and obviously so clear that this is a place of refuge for you, your breath, and guiding the awareness and the focus to those places. Another one that is really powerful for me is to when the smudginess on the prism becomes aware to me. So I've shown up and I've paid attention, and I can see that there is a smudge happening. So for me, another word for smudge might be reactivity. I'm feeling reactivity in my body or a closing in my body. It's making it harder for me to show up and be present, to receive the wisdom of the interconnectivity of what's around me. I've become very myopic, and the reactivity has like almost like closing a door. So the light went from being wide open to a narrow little passageway. When I have the awareness, number one, to show up and see that, oh, reactivity is happening, okay, then my response that I've been playing with and that feels like wisdom to me at this moment is to step back into that witness and just to watch the reactivity do its course, to give it room. One of my teachers, Adyashanti, talks about how everything in life, an emotion, a thought form, it's a thing, and it wants to be free just like everything else. And any time that we show up and contract against that thing, and even reactivity, and say, no, 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 you're messing up my talk, Mr. Nervousness, or whatever it might be. You're messing up my first date, whatever. And right, we then become almost like we're trying to push it down. And I think that's what, we now have enough science to show that that's what keeps trauma stored in the body tissues. And then we don't get the experience of the light getting to do the prism through us in a way that feels so freaking amazing, and we feel happy. So this ability to show up, pay attention, coin of the realms right there. Thank you, Nikki Scully. And then step back and be like, I'm going to give this energy freedom to be, not to express itself in the way of like, okay, so let's say I just got really angry, something got triggered and I got really angry. So now what I'm saying in this instance is not to express itself to now wreak havoc on other people, because that's just putting like spewing toxins into the environment, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually interested in that. I haven't said this yet, but this is the next most important step, is letting go. You watching and relaxing, like relax. Okay, the last thing, the neuroses is not relaxing. And I'm not asking the neuroses to relax. The reactivity is still going to go on and do its thing because it needs its freedom. But I'm not going to merge with it so that I'm only that neuroses. That's where mental health craziness happens. And I think we feel like we're trapped in a world of pain. But there's another way out. And this has been really the most beautiful thing for me lately, Indigo, as far as my own personal explorations and learnings, which is when I feel that, I maybe use my breath, take a deep breath, whatever it takes, just relax the musculature. I'm very body centric. So for me, if I'm able to relax my body, I can usually relax my mind. So I relax, and then it's an actual intention, and it's a discipline, but an intention of, I let go. I let go of needing to control that energy. I give it freedom to be what it is. That neuroses, and the joy is, and this is where, so as I mentioned earlier in this talk, we met, Indigo and I, through Nikki Scully and a body of work that she teaches called alchemical healing. And this moment of letting go, of relaxing and letting go around the neuroses, of sitting back behind it, it's like an alchemical transformation. It just, something happens. And so instead of me needing to be angry to feel better or get in a fight to feel better, to get that energy moving, because everyone wants the feeling of energy moving. We do not like it when the energy does not move. No one does. But when we actually are able to let go, bring the beautiful soul force of awareness of that witness conscious and the great mystery of it, right, to it, there's an alchemical concoction that happens. And honey, I think that's when we got some gold, that thing is, it leaves the body and it's like purification. It really feels at that moment like it's purifying the vessel. It's shining up the prism. The light can move through again. And it's like, hallelujah, baby Jesus, really, this works? I mean, this has really been extraordinary for me. So I don't get it every time. My humanness, as my partner or anyone else could attest to, definitely comes to the forefront, and my mind. But I can rewind and remember. And I think, and I truly believe this for any of us, that when we bring our sincerity to our practice, and I mean like deep sincerity, sitting, you look at images of Zen monks, whose life is this, this practice of sitting with themselves and cleaning themselves and the world through their consciousness. I think that when we come to our day-to-day life, not necessarily needing to be nuns or monks, but our day-to-day life with that kind of sincere desire to clean our prisms so that we can feel the joyful vitality of life moving through us, I think that sincerity in itself is enough to untether. And actually that word came to me, one of my great teachers, Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul. Our soul is untethered from this personal experience of reactivity. It untethers and is able to experience, back to what we spoke about at the beginning of our talk, a kind of interconnectivity that feels so dang good that, unfortunately, none of us were taught in our cultures to do this, or very few of us. I'm sure there are some indigenous tribes and people out there who do this. And certainly, maybe if you were born into a kind of ashram or spiritual society where, that you had good teachers at a very young age. But very, very few of us were born with a tool of what to do with our reactivity. And that's where I praise COVID in a way, because I do think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's brought to the top of the news cycle a real issue that this isn't new. Our insanity, and why I say insanity is I just mean it's a little insane to have to think that we can control the world and the world should be making us happy. Like, it's a little insane. Instead, I think that the reverse that we're learning is, oh, we have tools inside ourselves, not to change the world out there, but to change the world in here.
Hmm. I just want to sit with that for a minute. Feel that. Yeah. And I love how life brings ripples. So just yesterday, I was with a group and teaching, and it wasn't with the words you were speaking, but the essence of what you're sharing was what we were talking about. How we are so programmed to push away that which is discomforting, right? If it doesn't feel good, we're like, we try and that's part of the shoving it down, is trying to get a distance from it, right? Rather than just, I feel shitty right now and I'm going to show up to that. I feel amazing right now. I'm going to show up to that, rather than immediately trying to get on to the next thing. Okay, what's next? Or I just did an amazing thing. I accomplished a thing I've been working on. Wow. Okay, what's next? Right? That's one of my challenges, is to be with the accomplishment rather than just be like, okay, I'm moving on now, right? To be with it, to feel the anger without being the anger.
Yeah.
And it's so important today. It's always important, yesterday, tomorrow, but really, in each moment, that we can arrive into the truth of our emotions, because they're ever flowing, they're ever changing. Happiness is a goal, and it's so good to feel happiness, but it too is an emotion and it shifts, right? Just like the sun moves across the sky, our emotions move throughout our day. And how do we be with them? How do we show up to them? And what you're saying is just it, is to like, take a moment, lean away from it. And in the leaning away from it, it allows us to lean into it without being tethered to it somehow.
Yes, beautifully articulated, Indigo. Beautifully articulated.
Because when we try and get away from it, we miss the opportunity to learn from that emotion. Whether it's anger, it's showing up for a reason. It's there to teach us something, right? Or grief, right? Or joy, uncertainty.
Yeah. It
Expect.
is it is peculiar that there is such an inclination for us to move away from the uncomfortable. That is peculiar to me. I don't quite understand that, because I think that maybe one of the great, very simple gifts that have you, I would think about like Wim Hof and his ice baths or something, or acupuncture, or walking on gravel, or there's all kinds of things that are painful that are ultimately very healthy for us. And I think that doing those practices, back to how do we embody wisdom and truth in our lives, I think that doing some practices that are painfully healthy for us are actually good teachers. They've been good teachers for me, of learning how to open to discomfort and to let the heart have all of its 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, as the Buddhists would say. To let the orchestra of your heart play. I think that when we have that perspective, when we know at any moment we can call on that perspective, because right, that perspective is actually who we are. I mean, that's what the ancient wisdom traditions have shown us. Like that's it. That's the truth right there. And so it's not like copping out or leaving this world. It's saying, okay, let me center into what I am, and then let me meet this world from that place. And then, if I can open up to the 10,000 sorrows and the 10,000 joys, the 10,000 things and the 10,000 non things, if I can just show up for it all, that's where, if the goal was to build our soul force, that's where that happens. You know, in Buddhism also, they talk about compassion, loving kindness meditation, or metta. That's another practice for what is it, Tonglen practice, a specific kind of compassion practice maybe you're familiar with, where you're literally guided in this ancient Buddhist practice to breathe in the 10,000 sorrows of the world into your body, and then you purify them. Again, back to this purification process, purifying them on an exhale, releasing them purified in love and into the world. So you actually choose to embody and release, knowing that you have the power to transform. And I think that, if anything feels like sort of that coin of what turns me on, it's knowing that I and we humans, more than we humans have the power to transform. And that there is so my work is, Life Honey is my company, and it's a wellness company, but we have gift packages that are very specifically based off of a 15th century tradition called kintsugi, which is, are you familiar with kintsugi? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, tell
Yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah. Kintsugi's in the 15th century, the Japanese said, well, instead of discarding a piece of pottery that breaks, we're going to pick up all the little pieces and glue it together with gold, so that we have a bowl that was more beautiful than before it was broken.
Mm.
And the each of our little kits at Life Honey actually invites the celebrant to do a ritual where they will break the bowl. They'll go through a ceremony and then glue the pieces back together, with this idea of, both how resilient we are, and also looking at what is that gold? What is the gold glue that bonds us? And I think that we've been talking about that during this entire talk. And this also is a great, you know, die and be reborn again. Die to also the trauma, the personal self, and be reborn again. Die our planet right now. Eckhart Tolle would potentially say, in his whole A New World or A New Earth work, it's that he sees, and many teachers do at this time, that we're at this crux, this critical moment of dying to be reborn again. I think that there's nothing more valuable than learning tools of resilience and who we really are right now, because all we have to do is look at the oil spill in my backyard and COVID around the planet, and those are just two of many things to be able to say, hey y'all, like, this is pretty big. And I think, would you remember what Bruce Lipton said on your interview a couple months ago? He gave us a quote around the amount of species that have gone extinct since 1970, the percentage of species.
A big percentage. I don't remember the exact number, but 60 is what's coming to my mind, but I don't know if that's quite right, but a
It was,
lot.
I agree. I think it was something like that, Indigo. And it was that percentage it's outstanding, whatever it is. And what he was saying, I do remember this, that in all of the global extinctions that we've had, and we're in our fifth one right now, I think fifth or sixth maybe, that of all the global extinctions that we've had, this is actually the quickest that species have declined. And so, like, we're in it, and not to end on a negative note, but rather it's that, like, can we open to it? And what tools do we need and do we have to be able to open into it? Because here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. This notion of deep time is tickling me right now. That from our moment myopic, human centric perspective, right? Our lifetime is everything. It's our experiences in our lifetime. But when we talk about 5 extinctions or 6 extinction sessions on this planet alone, that's such deep time. And look at everything that then grows out of that. It's that contraction and expansion, and we're in this contraction
Yes.
period. And there has to be somewhere in all of this conversation, this, well, the word trust and faith come in. Not like I have faith of whatever the faith is, but just having faith that it's all exactly what it is, right? Not necessarily what I want it to be or not want it to be, but it is what it is. And how do I embrace that truth of what is? Right? That doesn't necessarily mean compliance with someone that's hurting me, right? And oh, it just is what it is. I'm being abused. So, not so much that, or, this ever searching for the next pleasure. It is what it is. I want to feel good all the time, right? I'm going to these opposites, but here we are. There's an oil spill. We just heard from you today down in the LA area. It's not the first oil spill, right? There's Fukushima, and though it's faded from the news, it's still doing its thing. It's still putting toxins into the earth. There's so much happening right now. And how do we show up to that? How do we show up to that? We breathe, we lean away, right? We become the witness. And through that place of witnessing, then we can act from a pure place. Our prism then is able to be a little shinier, and we can step forward then.
Yes, yes. And Indigo, you mentioned a moment ago about having the capacity to see the deep time, the contractions and the expansions, that this is not our first time with mass global extinction on planet Earth. And that in a way, there's a comfort to that, isn't there? I mean, of course, this is human created, that's the first time that's ever happened. But there is a comfort to being able to go, oh, there's an inhale and an exhale of even Earth species as well. And maybe there's a poignant beauty that can point us to. I remember in my very young years, I had a punk rock friend who made a bunch of bumper stickers, and one of his bumper stickers was this loud black and white sticker that said, "You are going to die." Yeah. And I thought it was amazing. I mean, little hippie Robin girl, I was like, that's amazing. And like I have it in my on my bookshelf to this day because it is a call to life. That reality is a call to life. And whether it be on the personal scale or the global scale, it simply speaks of that great inhalation and exhalation, the cycles of life, and whatever time scale we want to meet them with. And we show up. We show up and we pay attention and we experience it. And maybe that's where even some of the great goddess wisdom comes in when I think about just the ability to really be present with the fullness of life and not having it to be any different than it is. That simply be here with it.
So there's a quote, and this may not be exact because I haven't actually read the book in a very long time, but it's stuck with me for a long time, all these years. There's a book called Plant Spirit Medicine by Elliot Cohen. And somewhere in that book, he says that healing isn't about whether you live or die. It's about how you live.
Ooh, yeah.
Because 100% of us will die in our lifetime, right? That's just the truth of it. And so, how are we living? Whether we're perfectly healthy in the medical kind of definition of healthy, or whether we're moving with COVID, or whether we have a cancer, or whether whatever it may be, right? Whatever it may be, how are we living? That's the question. So maybe that's a question to leave us with today. How are we living?
I
Right?
love that.
How are we living?
Yes.
Robin, if people want to find you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah. So lifehoney.com, and that's how are we living? That's apropos. Life, Life, and honey, which is the ability to bring sweetness into life, whatever the 10,000 joys or 10,000 sorrows are that we're experiencing, that we can show up to life and have it be a sweet experience, even if it's painful. And that's really what my company name is, and that's where you can also find these different kits as well for different life occasions, like newlyweds or bereavement. We have a bereavement kit, a healing kit, etc. And there's also a classes link on there. I do offer a free by donation class the first Tuesday of every month. So that would be tomorrow for those of you who are watching live. And that's at 6:30 p.m. You're all invited. You simply go to the class link on lifehoney.com and come and join us for, it's a mindfulness class. And we're together to about 7:45. It's Pacific time, 7:45 or 8 o'clock. And we go deeper into these wisdoms together and practice it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And would you show your book one more time so people can see the cover?
Sure. So
Yeah.
this is the charisma code.
I love the image on the front.
Isn't that beautiful? There's a male on the back as well. You can kind of see him. He's really gorgeous. This came actually from some artists at the dean at USD, University of San Diego, had this in her office, and we worked with them to have it on our book because we thought if there's any language beyond words that we all share, it's charisma, it's our soul force, it's that ability to, that again, if soul force comes from being all connected, then if we can speak that language, then we have the ability to truly be a global citizen and to show up as more than just our one life experience, but the wisdom of all life experiences.
Wow. Well, I feel like we could keep talking about this for hours and hours. I'm so grateful for you giving this one little hour of your life to share such a big topic and just to connect more deeply with you. And for those of you who are catching this in the future time, our future time, it'll be your present tense time when you're watching it. And those of you who tried to get onto Facebook to watch it like you usually do, I apologize. I don't know why. It wasn't my fault that Facebook went down, at least that I'm aware of. So thank you for tuning in. And next month, we'll be meeting with a woman. Her name is Tina Edwards, and she is an eco-psychologist. And so it'll be wonderful to hear her perspective on truth and wisdom. Thank you, Robin.
Oh, thank you, Indigo. This has been such a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this conversation. I do hope I get to see you in my little Life Honey world as well.
Yay. Well, with that, I say goodbye for now.
Bye for now.
For now.